Blake, you're muted.
Good start. Good start. Thank you. All right, now we'll go ahead and get started. And that gave a few more people time to get in the room. No matter how many times you do these things, there's always something. Let that be the only thing tonight. Okay, my name is Blake Johnson. I'm the Outreach and Inclusion Lead at I AM ALS, and I have the distinct honor of running our Ask Me Anything ALS series. So you likely have received a few emails from me. Again, thank you for joining tonight's conversation. For those who have never joined us for any event or an Ask Me Anything ALS, I'll share a bit about I AM ALS and the event series. I AM ALS is a patient-centric movement revolutionizing how to end disease. We provide critical support and resources to patients, caregivers, and loved ones, and we also empower advocates to raise awareness and lead the movement against ALS in driving the development of cures. Our Ask Me Anything ALS event series is not just a fun social media trend. It's actually an idea born out of the I AM ALS community, where ALS advocates living with and impacted by ALS come together to answer questions from an audience of people who are interested in the specific topic. So this one, of course, being clinical trials. I'm going to go over a few housekeeping things, and then we will get into the reason that we are here. So as you've noticed, this event is being recorded. We'll share the recording after the event, along with a post-event resource that's going to include information that was shared during the event. So if you're a note taker, hopefully we'll capture everything that's important, and you'll get that normally the week after the event as we get everything together. If you want to ask a question during the event, please use the chat feature. We'll be tracking questions that are submitted in the chat, and we'll be dragging them over into the questions that were pre-submitted to make sure that we get to as many questions as possible during tonight's hour and a half. If you wish to remain anonymous when asking a question, you can send that question directly to me using the direct message feature on Zoom. And then you can also use the raise your hand feature if you want to participate in the discussion and share your own experience. And to raise your hand, you can click on the reactions icon and then click raise hand, and we'll be sure to get to you. The final thing here is please mute yourself when you're not speaking so that we can allow the discussion to flow without interruptions or any background noise. So we've distributed the panelists' bios ahead of time. Hopefully everyone received that via email. It'll be included in the post-event resource as well. And before I pass it over to Hope, I just wanted to remind everyone that Ask Me Anything ALS events are intended to allow people with a specific experience to share their story and help answer questions from their perspective. The information being shared tonight is not medical, and we really highly suggest that you connect with your care team before making any decisions to be sure that what you do makes the most sense for you, so in any decisions that you make as well. So we won't be suggesting any specific trials or research opportunities this evening. Rather, we'll be providing insights to help you make an informed decision. With that, I'll pass it over to Hope to share a bit more about herself and her reason for being here tonight.
Thank you, Blake. Hi, everyone. My name is Hope Fueling. I'm an ALS support specialist at I AM ALS. The ALS support team works to support individuals impacted by ALS with their emotional and practical needs. This can include facilitating access to information about understanding ALS and care options, insurance and legal assistance, assistive devices and equipment needs, financial assistance, emotional support, amongst other things. If you have any ALS-related needs that we cannot directly assist with, we do our best to connect you with the person or organization that can. I know that ALS can feel overwhelming to navigate and talk about at times, especially the larger decisions and planning that comes along with it. So I'm here today to provide emotional support and resources as our wonderful panel members discuss clinical trials. Please know that anyone joining this call can reach out to me privately at any time using the Zoom chat feature, and myself and the rest of the ALS support team can be reached at gethelp@iamals.org, which I'm putting in the chat now. You can email us at any time if you'd like any support from a support specialist, and I will pass it back to Blake.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Rob, who is actually moderating tonight's discussion with our all-star lineup of panelists. So Rob, take it away.
Thank you so much for that, Blake. Yes, I am honored to be here and to moderate this panel of amazing individuals. These are folks who are who have a lot of experience with clinical trials, both lived experience and then have been spending a lot of time looking into clinical trials. So I'm going to talk about each one of them individually a little bit, but you have their bios. I'm going to start with Monique. Monique Green is from Houston, Texas. She was diagnosed in 2013. She continued working for 4 years.
Please check your connection or use a different speaker.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. So anyway, she was diagnosed in 2013. She continued to work as a nurse practitioner for 4 years afterwards, and then decided to retire. But amazingly, has kept up with her NP license and through continuing educations. And so we have, she's a medical expert, and so we're glad to have her on board here tonight. Tim Lowry, a pharmacist from Buffalo. He is diagnosed in 2018, and then he has been super active with I AM ALS and in advocacy, and so really great to have him. In fact, he's worked on the clinical trials team and then also the community outreach team. There's a series of panels, so if anybody is interested in having people with lived experience share what that's like with people who might not know, there are these things aptly called the Tim Lowry panels that you can organize and schedule and have them come visit you. Callie Orsolak, also very active with I AM ALS. It's been my partner in crime recently as we work on ALS signals. She's one of the creators, the co-creator of ALS Signal. And so we will be likely finding an opportunity to shamelessly promote that at some point during this evening. And then finally, last but not least, we've got Judy Carey. I mean, she's the real deal. She is a nurse manager at the Healy Center at Mass General, so one of the premier places for clinical trials in the entire country. And so she works with patients and shares information about trials with them, and can help people navigate. So she's doing that on a daily basis. So again, amazing panel with lived experience that are thinking clinical trials on a daily basis.
Which organization is this? Does it say?
So I'm going to kick it off with the first question here. So and this is kind of a good one. This is a good one to get people rolling. And I'm going to start with Tim and Callie, but I'm kind of interested in everybody's experience for those who have participated in clinical trials. So what type of information did you look at when you were figuring out which trials made the most sense?
I started by finding the location of nearest ALS clinics who are involved in trials. You can find that information on the ALS Geospatial Hub website. I would look at Signal Dashboard, clinicaltrials.gov to see what's current. I then would ask my neurologist what he thought looked promising. I would also Google the study drug to find out more. I looked at Mass General and Neil's websites to see what research they had going, including the Healing Platform trial. Sometimes I got lucky and found some of the leading clinicians were giving a binder on current research and upcoming trials. I also read the Facebook group about ALS clinical trials and research because I know there is some good information about upcoming trials. I would also look at the study requirements to make sure I could be a candidate and that it was patient-friendly. I also didn't want to burden my wife with too many visits. So I paid attention to how many visits were required, as we had to travel at least 5 hours to get to a clinic doing trials. After all that, I decided where and what trials I wanted to screen for.
Thank you, Tim. That's a pretty comprehensive list of criterion that you went through. That's very impressive.
Because he's a pharmacist, that's why. Very thorough and precise. I mean, obviously Tim covered, I think, most of what we all think of. For us, we also, depending on the length of the trial, looked at whether or not, and hopefully, I'm not sure if you did say this, Tim, but whether or not the site would reimburse you for travel or for a hotel, and whether or not a caregiver would be allowed as well. You do need a support person with you, so that's something important to ask. Is not only will they cover your costs, but will they cover the cost of the caregiver that's also traveling with you. One of the things we made sure we checked on too is whether there was an OLE. That meant whether or not the trial would have the ability to take the medication after the trial was complete. It's funny when it comes down to it. We chose the trials that called us back and gave us the opportunity. So don't pigeonhole yourself into like, I only want this trial. Make sure you kind of put your name out to as many different sites that you can, that you're able to get to, and don't, I guess, unless you really have your heart set on something and you're pretty sure you're going to get into another trial, take the trial that comes first, because you only have a limited amount of time for most trials to fit the inclusion criteria. So the first one that comes along that's acceptable to you, take that one, because you may not have an opportunity. I'll give you an example. When my husband was diagnosed, we ended up taking a phase 1, and we did enjoy the experience, even though it wasn't necessarily something that we thought of when we were talking about trials. We said we'd only take a phase 3 when we started looking. So don't be scared to try a trial if they call you and ask you to be part of that trial.
Thank you, Callie. Yeah, you mentioned a couple of things. One, I wanted to make sure that people understand what an OLE is, or open label extension. Can you describe that just a little bit?
Yeah, and so once first for trials generally in phase 2, 3, phase 1 doesn't often offer an OLE, but phase 2 and 3 trials, which are later trials, can offer an OLE, and there are varying lengths. So that's something you want to ask too, because some OLEs already know up front that they're going to be, a year long. Some OLEs could be shorter, so you want to kind of ask that as well. Which is very.
An open label extension is where everybody, whether they're on the study medication or on placebo, will end up on the study medication and then that. So it's open label at that time.
Right. So if you happen to be on placebo, although you wouldn't necessarily know, you will actually get an opportunity to take the drug.
Gotcha. So Monique, is there anything to add that you used in your decision criteria as you chose clinical trials?
I just pretty much signed up for what was available in my area, because when I was eligible for clinical trials, I was still working full-time. Thank you.
Yeah, I've heard that a couple of times. It's the geography is sometimes pretty limiting in terms of how in the trials in which you can participate, particularly if there's a larger burden for in-clinic visits. So based on these answers, I think it rolls nicely into our next question, which is, Judy. Yes.
I'm sorry, can I add on to the conversation on that?
Of course.
Okay. So I've done this for like 6 years. So OLE is now becoming active treatment extension. So if you see either or, it's the same thing. It just means that you have the ability or the option to get the actual investigational medication. So that's one thing I wanted to say. One of the questions I often would get asked is, Judy, I want to be in the most promising study. And if I knew that, I would be a very wealthy person, I think. So I tell everyone they are all promising. When you think about it, phase 1s, phase 2s, phase 3s, they are all promising until the data is shared at the very end of the trial. So because we don't know which one is going to maybe be the most helpful, think about the ones that sound interesting to you when you're thinking about all of those other things that everyone said, because those are important. You know, where the location of the trial is and how many study visits and do they reimburse. All of those things are important, but just also think about what's interesting to you. And then one more thing, Callie, I was going to add on to what you said. One of the things I've seen that's changed over the 6 years is, you're right. Initially, phase 1s didn't have an OLE, but now I am seeing that it's the rage. Everyone, at most every trial, I can't say that all of them, but I do see a lot more open label extensions or active treatment extensions. So I just wanted to add that has been a nice welcome change. So that's what I have to add.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That was fantastic and very helpful information. I did not know about the new acronym for OLEs. That's good news, or good information. But anyway, that does roll nicely into our next question, especially after all of the things that were considered. How does a person find the time to look into these details? I don't even know how you even begin to answer this question, but I'm very curious to know what you have to say.
Monique, do you want to answer that one, or I can take the lead and anyone can add on?
Okay. So I outsource a lot of my study materials. I implored the help of friends that were pharmacists, nurses, doctors. Although I'm a nurse myself, ALS is not my area of expertise. So I would let other professionals take a look at the clinical trial and tell me, yes, this looks like something that would be tolerable and easy to do, or no, this might not fit into your routine. So if you can outsource to a friend or medical professional that can really break down the jargon in the clinical trials, so it will be easier for you to understand.
That's fantastic. I think that that we have a natural tendency not to ask for help, and I think it's really brave to ask for help. So I think that that's a really great place to start, is find the people that you can trust and that you can, like you said, outsource to. Judy, thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I was gonna kind of echo what Monique said, like find a study buddy, find somebody who will help you. I can't imagine when you're managing all the changes that come along with ALS clinically, to also then be able to take deep dives into all of the research material, informed consents and finding trials. Once you locate the ones that you like on like clinicaltrials.gov and the I AM ALS signal dashboard and meals. Another thing to do, so maybe you have somebody in your family who likes to do research, so or study buddy. Also circling back with your neurologist to ask his or her opinion once you identify a few trials, what their thoughts are, because remember, they're all promising until the data is shared. So maybe that's another person to bring into your camp, is actually the doctor providing care for you. And then the third thing I was thinking is, at many centers, there are people who do talk about trials. I am finding. That wasn't so much the case when maybe I started, but maybe like even identifying someone at the clinic that you go to who can help you, go through the criteria and kind of why are they doing this particular trial in ALS. So those would be the three things that I would have.
Thank you, Judy. It's interesting that you mentioned that because that's kind of how I got involved with ALS as my sister-in-law was diagnosed, and because I had a career in the pharmaceutical industry, the family reached out to me, and I was sorting through what was available. I saw that there wasn't much, and so wanted to get involved, and so ended up creating an ALS advocate. So here I am. But anyway, that's my story, and I'm not on the panel. Anybody else? What about and you mentioned this too, Judy, like the idea of bringing information to the clinic staff. And the next question is what to do if the clinic staff don't even mention clinical trials. And I have to be honest, I hear this a lot. I'm sure that doesn't happen at Mass General, but it happens at clinics and neurology offices around the country. I know it does because we hear this a lot. So what should people do? I mean, how do you handle that situation if that's what you're in?
I'm happy to field that one. Don't settle. Don't settle for that. That's for sure. For some people, knowing about research, whether they choose to get involved or not, it's actually, they look at it, I think, as part of their clinical care, right? Like getting the prescribed approved medications and PT and all the specialties, but they also look at the knowledge of what's going on in research as a very important part of their care. So I would ask my clinician, and I would say, if you do not do research, do you have colleagues that do research whom you could connect me to? Or what do you do? I think it's important for everybody who decided to pick this as a career to know that research is happening and to be responsive to their patients. Whether they do research or not, that's okay. Sometimes they just can take care of clinic, and that's the most important thing. But being able to identify others out in the field, they all have colleagues that work at different hospitals who maybe do research that they could, connect. I have that happen to me. Colleagues of doctors here reach out because they want to learn about research. But the most important thing is don't settle for that. Research is happening, and everyone should know about it.
So Monique, you mentioned that you'd be interested in sharing your thoughts on this question. Is this something that happened to you?
No, but my experience was that my particular ALS clinic had a dedicated research coordinator. And if you were eligible, they would actually approach you. And I think it's important that if you are not approached in your particular clinic, maybe ask, is there a coordinator that I could speak to see what is available?
Yeah, I think asking questions, that's and like you said, Judy, not settling.
And I'll just mention, I'm the opposite, where we did not have any research going on at our facility at all. So, that wasn't really something that was even offered to us. But one of the things I did do when my husband was diagnosed is that, I started looking on, I actually didn't use social media very much at all. And once my husband was diagnosed, I went on social media immediately to try and connect with people who have ALS that maybe live in other places and find out, okay, well, what did you do when you were diagnosed? Like if you were in another center without research, what did you do? And so I did. That was one of the things that I thought was most helpful, was just try and learn from other people's experiences to see where other people had successes and other people had maybe roadblocks. So I think that's important as well, is that just you know, even if you don't want to be on your social media all day, one of the things I can recommend is at least, you know, joining some ALS specific groups on Twitter and on Facebook, just to be able to connect and get ideas about what you can do if you don't have research at your center and who you can connect with.
No, that's a helpful idea, even though sometimes it's it's a dangerous slippery slope to going down the social media,
It is, but it is helpful to know that, you know, to find out what other people traveled and that other people had experiences, you know, positive experiences some places, and you know, some people weren't afraid to do a phase 1 trial, which is what we ended up doing, you know. So it's sometimes helpful just to get that bit of information that you wouldn't be able to get from your own center if they don't happen to have any research available.
Good. So, Tim, anything to add to that? Okay, we got a minute, or we can wait. Yeah, I'm interested for those. What is there something to think about anyway? Is there a way to approach it if you're at a clinic that doesn't do research? Is there a way to tactfully, you know, suggest that you're interested in that and that they owe it to you to look into it on your behalf?
I mean, everyone should know, right? The provider should all know that this is of utmost important. I was just going to say, sometimes we have patients who have a local clinic that maybe doesn't offer research, and then they maybe go to a clinic that's further away from where they live, but they keep them in their pocket because they're very well connected to research. And I that's another thought that I had, is like maybe having 2 clinics, one that, you know, you're getting access or understanding of research, and then one that takes care of you, because I think it's important to have one locally to take care of clinical needs. So that's another thought.
And that is what we ended up having to do. I think that is extremely important. I think unless you are not planning on being in any clinical trials, like that's just not something for you, then you know, you can stay with your clinic that doesn't offer it. But that's actually what we ended up having to do, is go to a center that could give us options for research. I was going to just mention that even if you aren't interested in research, I think you should still check in to a center that maybe does, just so that there isn't anything that maybe has prevented you, saying like there's no obstacle that you have artificially put up, thinking I don't want to do research because I don't want to travel, I don't want to take experimental drugs. You know what, just go somewhere else then to get a second opinion and talk to people about research, because you might find out that maybe not all drugs involve or not all trials involve taking massive amounts of blood, or not all trials maybe have to have you come into the center. Like there are some trials that can be done with very, very few visits. And maybe you think all trials involve getting a lumbar puncture, you know. So if those are your roadblocks and those are your things that you're saying, I'm not going to do research because I don't want to have to live out my days traveling to a clinic, or, you know, doing something painful, you know, if that's what your roadblock is, then maybe you should check out a second center and talk to someone who is involved in research, just so that you're clear and that you can make a good, honest, educated opinion about what you want to do.
Absolutely. Thank you. And it looks like Tim has prepared his response. Sorry, Tim, I didn't mean to fling that at you spontaneously. But.
We had to ask my neurologist about trials after we had a specific drug in mind. My wife and I have tried to get the office to at least have a flyer on the wall. We also got information from the Facebook groups to see what others think.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that's one of the things that we, would like to do as a clinical trials team, is get the word out there that there are trials available. There are tools that are available for patients to help them find clinical trials and, go through all of the information that they would need to make a good decision. So thank you for that. I think that was a great discussion, and thank you all for your responses there. Just an interesting question that came in. Is there a limit on how many clinical trials that one can participate in? And how do you know?
I can start out with that one. So there's no such thing as a limit to clinical trials, but there are some general rules when it comes to interventional trials, and that you cannot generally not partake in 2 interventional trials, because how would you know if one of the trials you're in, how would you know if that intervention actually did anything if you're also in another interventional trial that's also meant to also cause a change? So it would be very unlikely. I can't think of any situation where you could be in 2 interventional trials where they are putting in an intervention, either a drug or a device or something, and following you out to see if there's any changes or benefit or slowing of progression. If I think you would not be able to do 2 of those types of trials. You can, in situations, you just have to check with your clinic, be part of an interventional trial where they might be giving you a drug or what have you, but also be in an observational trial. That's where they, may take samples or monitor you, say, remotely for your activity level or something over time. So it just follows what you normally would do. So there's no specific intervention. So there's 2 types of trials: an interventional trial, which again is most likely you would relate to like a drug intervention trial, versus observational, where the clinicians just follow you for a certain amount of time and will ask you questions or maybe take samples. So that's possible that you could participate in those 2 types of trials. There is a possibility too, depending on the type of trial and the inclusion exclusion criteria, that you could possibly partake in a interventional trial and it's finished and over. Maybe there's no OLE in that trial. You're completely done it. It's done. It's over. And then there is a possibility that if you still meet an inclusion criteria for another trial, you may be able to join another trial afterwards. As long as you fit their inclusion exclusion criteria. Like some trials, will prohibit you from participating, say, from time of diagnosis, or maybe if you had, some of them may prevent you from, if you've had gene or stem cell therapy in the past. So you may be able to participate in more than one trial sequentially, as long as you still meet their inclusion exclusion criteria.
Judy, any follow-up to that?
Great answer, Callie. So the only thing I would add, I think you said everything, like especially like the stem cell and the gene therapy, those can be exclusionary to trials. But not always, like platform there, it's not. So you can only be in one drug trial at a time. And maybe from the patient's perspective, they want to take whatever they can to maybe help slow progression. From the science side, that would kind of mess up their science experiments if somebody's taking 2 experimental drugs at the same time. And so that's I think the reason why that's that guideline set up, or that rule. But you can absolutely participate in lots of observational studies. Some of them collect your blood, some of them collect your poop, some of them do imaging. Some of them you use your smartphone for, and you can be in as many of those. Some of them are all done remotely, and be in a one interventional type of trial at a time, like Callie explained.
Very good. And I also think it's worth noting that most of the interventional trials will allow you to be on standard of care or approved medications, just not on another an investigational drug.
That's such a great point. Yes, and right now, Relivrio got approved in September. So while everyone's probably trying to enroll 4 trials, it's a little sluggish right now because people want to get on the approved drugs. So the trial companies have to figure out how to incorporate those approved drugs into their trials. And patients don't want to get on to start the trial until they're on the approved treatment. So we work with, I'm sure every center will work with people to get them screened whenever it's, they're on their approved treatments. So good point.
Yeah. And just one further to that is that it's interesting that many trials that initiate in either Canada or the US, where edaravone is approved, will allow that. There's still some trials kicking around right now that may have companies that have been based in Europe. And so because I think Switzerland might be the only country in Europe that that actually has approved edaravone. Most of those trials, or some of those trials, will not allow you to enroll if you're on edaravone, which sounds crazy because we've had it approved in North America and Canada and US for years now. But that's still, you know, there are some trials that come to mind. So make sure you ask that question. Don't assume because that would be a bit of a waste of your precious time to go into trial and have to stop a drug that you're already on. So yeah, that's a good thing to bring up and ask about.
Yeah, and the trial team that is such a great point. And now we're running into Relyvrio, right? Because some people can get Relyvrio AMX 0035 and some people haven't gotten it yet. So it's the same concept. It's in the trial in Europe, but it's approved here and in Canada.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. It's called, what is it called in Canada, Callie? What's Relyvrio called? What is it?
Albrioza, I believe.
Albrioza.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And the trial team should help you work through that. That's one of my questions when I ask people, are you on the 3 R's? And then I run through them. So hopefully the trial team, wherever you're talking to, will help you parse through that info.
Hope everything's okay. There's nothing else on this question. The next question is, I'm sure there's a mathematical answer to it, which I don't expect anybody to know, but on average, how often must a trial participant visit the ALS Center, and how long should they expect the participation to last in a trial?
I said that I'd answer this. There is no magical number. I mean, there's trials that range. Right now, I'm going to just use my site. I have a trial that's 22 weeks. I have a trial that's 24 weeks. I have a trial that's a year. So, and then there's open label after those. So let's say on the short end, 6 months, and on the long end, let's say a year. Okay. And then there might be open label, and some of those open labels even expand beyond 6 months. Some of them go on for a year or even longer than that. And then as far as the number of visits, there is no magic number for that. Some of them have 6 to 8 visits, but I'm thinking of a trial that has 26 to 30 visits if you go all the way through. So,
well, I can think of a phase 1 pharmacokinetic study that would be a single dose, one visit.
Yep, that's nice. I guess it's nice, but you're not going to see much benefit too. Right. So that's the other thing. So I would say, let's say average like 12, 13 over a year's time, maybe, but don't, quote me on that. Some of them can be remote too. Some of them can be phone call check-ins. So that's, again, the study team who you're talking to should do a good job of answering those type of questions for you.
And one of the things I think we've tried to do is make the people that are designing clinical trials aware that it is a burden to get into the clinic, and it is difficult for patients to do that. So to be able to minimize the number of in-person visits is beneficial, especially if you have to travel a long way. Sounds like you did, Tim, with your trial. I'm sure you appreciated any opportunity to do it via televisit. Good. So here's an interesting question. And again, this is almost impossible to answer with a specific number, but how likely is someone's quality and length of life expected to extend from participating in a trial? Tim, thoughts on that?
I don't have a definitive number or answer for someone else, but I do believe it helped me with my mental health and outlook on living with ALS, trying to be part of the solution. That's something I think we can agree is valuable and hard to quantify.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think participating in a clinical trial is an act of altruism, really, and it does it helps it furthers the science for everybody, and with the goal of having drugs available for the entire community at some point. More drugs, more opportunities.
Yeah, and I think you learn a little bit each visit that you do have. You always kind of, especially when you have such a complicated disease as ALS, your regular clinic visits, you never cover everything. And so it's just nice when you're in a trial that, it just happens that you might just have a conversation with one of the research people in the research team, or with the nurses or the physician, that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So I know that this may not apply, so I want to make sure that this doesn't, that I don't say this applies to all trials, but it was even just nice for us because when we did the phase 1 trial, they were able to give us our routine blood work back. And so that was just nice because that just saved us having to go to a lab because we had that done. So, there are some useful things to being part of a trial, and interesting conversations and things you can learn. And they would always, the one thing I guess that's different about participating in a clinical trial is that when you're at the trial site, or you're on, say, you're having the visit, say, over a Zoom or something like that, like, it's all about you, the person that's on the trial. You are the most important person in that space, in that meeting. It's all about, how you're feeling. If you have any questions, like, what can we do is there anything we can do to assist you today? Would you like a cup of coffee? So there's something, about being center of attention and really feeling like, what you're doing is really important. I mean, you do leave the clinic site, with the thought that you are contributing to society, but that also that there are people that really care about you and want to help you.
Thanks. That's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought about that. Is that, it's sort of a augmentation of the care that you would receive at your non-clinical trial site, that you might get information that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So that's an interesting point. Anybody else? Judy, you got your hand up.
I just wanted to add, I always say that, when you come in for a research visit, we speak ALS, right? So when you come in to see us, you're definitely the center of attention. And oh my God, you are so much helping us to find answers. We can set up the best trials, but if we don't have willing participants, then we're never going to get to the answers. So I think, although I can't comment on the quality or length, what this might do, I do think that there's a placebo effect. That's something that actually happens. But there's also feeling, I think those who feel altruistic really get it. They understand that they are contributing to the big picture. They do really well in trials. They look forward to seeing their team. Tim saying, yep, I'm one of those people. But they like to get to know the coordinators and what's going on with them, and not always talking about ALS, but talking about how was your trip to wherever they might have gone. So it's really you become part of the research family. So
It's it kind of leads into our next question. No, Tim, you have something? Are you just agreeing? Yeah, very good.
One benefit many experience is better individual care from the clinic. I learned more about this disease and received excellent care from my team. I found out after my trial ended that I actually got the placebo during my trial, but I felt better during this time period. Could this have been due to the additional care, placebo effect, or hope? I think a little bit of each. I think another worthy benefit of participating is you contribute to the science of trying to understand our disease better. You get to contribute to the common good of our community.
Very good. Which is, it's interesting because I think you maybe started to answer or probably completely answered our next question, which is, should we be concerned about placebo? That's okay, Tim. We'll let you slide on that one. But no, it's should people be concerned about taking placebo? I mean, that's that is most of the trials out there involve a placebo. While we have tried to reduce and ultimately maybe one day eliminate placebo, we're not there yet. And for a drug to get approved, I can't imagine a situation where it could get approved without a placebo arm. Most people are interested in getting into a trial so that they could hopefully benefit from an experimental medication. But what about what are people's experience and what are thoughts on the placebo? Tim, I think we're pretty clear where you stand. Anybody else?
I think that's where you have to look at the OLE, and if you're not comfortable with getting a placebo, and there is no OLE, then that's not the trial for you, because the only way you'll get the drug is if you actually go through the randomization, and at the end you will get the drug. If there's no OLE, there's no guarantee, and therefore that might not be the trial for you. There are open label trials, so those are available to people that just won't accept any OL or any placebo. So there are those trials available as well. They're less common, but they are out there.
Yeah, and they tend not to be the ones that are registration enabling or the ones that are going to get it through the regulatory agencies and get it as an approved drug, unfortunately.
Maybe if you get the placebo, you won't have side effects, because drugs don't come without lovely side effects.
True, yeah, right.
So that could be one way of looking at it. And again, as Callie said, if it has an open label and it's not too terribly long, these are things you have to think about, right? If it's a year-long trial and you can be on placebo for a year, that might be, time to think about, is that something for you? So 6 months, maybe that's okay. It's really I think it's like really what we're saying is it's a personal decision at that point.
Yeah. And I guess look at the ratio too in that trial too, because there's many different, most of the trials now that are the new trials coming out, they have a, like a 75-25 for 2/3, 1/3. Again, some of the trials that have come up from companies, maybe, across the sea tend to be more like a 50-50. So look at that as well. They're not all it's not a 50-50 chance for all trials.
Yes, the Healy platform trials is a great example of a 3-to-1 active to placebo ratio, which we love. Monique, any thoughts on that? On participating and the benefits, even if you might not benefit? There's a lot of people are on placebo. There's also a lot of trials that don't end up not working. So
I think for me, I just wanted to feel like I was doing something. ALS is a disease of hurry up and wait. And if you're not taking a drug or you're not in the trial, you're just waiting to progress, waiting to, pass away. So it really gave me something to do, to feel like I was doing something, even if I got the placebo.
that's great. Thank you. So what were some of the major changes to what your daily life looked like when you participated in a trial? I've heard some of the good things that you've got You've got maybe a little more data, you connect with your character or connect with your clinical team. Anything else? What about, did it impact you? Was there anything that you had to stop doing as a result of the inclusion or exclusion criteria in the trial? Were there any supplements that you were taking that you couldn't take anymore? Was there anything like that, or were they pretty liberal in terms of allowing those things?
For our trial that we participated in, yeah, we were not allowed to take any supplements. You have to tell them if you are. Like luckily ours was it was a phase 1, and so we stopped things for a certain amount of time ahead of time, and so then we were able to resume after. But yeah, there was, but I think that is something that all trials have some certain criteria about whether they'll let you take supplements or not. So.
Did you feel like it sounds like the answer is probably yes, but did you feel like the additional work that you put into it, or the burden of travel, et cetera, or changes that you had to make, do you feel like that it was worth participating?
Yeah, of course. Like, is like, I think Monique actually explained it really well. Like you can sit there and do nothing, or you can be part of the solution, and you want to be part of the solution. And so, depending on what stage of ALS you're in, sometimes traveling isn't so bad. We got to travel to a nice warm destination, so we didn't mind. That part wasn't bad for us. But my husband had bulbar ALS, and so walking around, getting on an airplane and stuff wasn't an issue at all. So I think it's going to depend on what stage of ALS you're in, what type of ALS you have. So that part was okay for us, and it was a short study.
Very good. Glad to hear. Okay. Anything else on that? We good? All right. So here's a rather specific question. I don't know if anybody knows the answer to this, but why are there no trials being conducted for bulbar ALS? And I don't know that there's trials that are specifically excluding, but I don't know of what trials there are that are specific to bulbar ALS.
Yeah, so we're not there yet. The research just isn't there to say, we know a certain drug will only work in people with bulbar, or we know a drug will only work with a person that had limb onset or respiratory onset. I mean, we're at the place where we know trials will work for certain genes and not for people that don't have that gene mutation, but we're not there. We just don't know the difference, the differences between these types of sporadic ALS yet to be able to say like this drug will only work in certain types of ALS. There is so it was interesting that this question was asked, because there is actually a trial that's running overseas that actually is for bulbar patients. But I think they're using that more as an enrichment. Enrichment means only looking at one specific group of people. Sometimes enrichment means, how long you've had ALS for, or your breathing, or it's a specific group of people with very similar circumstances. So they share something similar, and it's easier to detect a change in a trial if you have people that are very similar. So there is actually a trial that's going on currently right now that's recruiting bulbar patients. But when you actually look at the drug and you look at the mechanism, it would be impossible for them to say that it would only work in people with bulbar ALS. There's just not enough known yet. Yeah. And then I guess I think of things like Nuedexta that's available to people. I mean, that is, it kind of targets more the bulbar area, but certainly it could be used by any type of person. So I think the answer is we're just not there yet where we can differentiate and target certain types of ALS, sporadic ALS, or ones that are non-gene ALS.
I'm just gonna follow what Callie said, and yes, we're not there yet, but that's part of what comes out of trials, right? For instance, with the platform trial, there's some positive signals that came out on one of the drugs that it definitely doesn't mean it's going to, cure bulbar ALS, but it might help with speech, So they have to take a deeper dive. It's when they say positive signal, it doesn't mean it met its primary outcome measures. It means there's something in there. We got to dive deeper into it. But that's what's so cool about some trials. That's what we're trying to get at. I think everyone would love for trials. Well, everyone would love for ALS to go away, but they would love for trials to be targeted just like for the genes like C9 or SOD1. So I think the more trials that we do, and if we can do them fast, quicker, still safe, then I think that's the type of data that will come out of some of these trials.
April, if you want to share something in the chat, just so we capture everything correctly, we can read that out loud for you.
Thank you. So a question, and this is, we're steering away from advice on specific trials, but I think that there's probably only a small handful here. What are the most promising trials for folks who have the genetic mutation C9orf72?
I'm going to put in a plug now for our signal. We said we were going to do it. Now we're going to do it. So there is, yeah. And Judy's alluded to this fact that, yes, if we knew what the most promising trials were, we'd all be in a rush to get into that trial and Judy would be rich. So I think you just need to find out what trials are available. And then then once you know which trials are available, you can contact the sites and see if you fit inclusion/exclusion criteria, because just because you have C9 doesn't necessarily mean you'll get in the trial for sure. Each trial has different inclusion/exclusion criteria, or in different areas of the country, So one of the things you can do on our signal dashboard is actually search by C9orf72 and also other genes as well. And then you can see the trials that are available and contact those sites and see if that's something you're interested in pursuing.
Yeah, I just have Signal up. I just clicked on that, and there's a small handful of trials that are specific to C9orf72.
Yeah, some of the ones that were for C9 are no longer recruiting, but there was a decent group of C9 trials there for a while. So yeah, go to the signal.
Yeah.
I'm just going to chime in really quick from April. She said, I believe ION trial BCI, which I just recently learned means brain computer interface, I believe, maybe communication and work computer not being used correctly at, I think, is it timed? And April, I'm going to have Hope connect with you to help provide some information and resources. I think that might be something that we can help you out with.
Yeah, many of the BCI trials that are out there are considered to be interventional, but they're not likely to be disease modifying. So that those are ones that we, at least as of today, we don't include in Signal.
Yeah, that's important. I think that, yeah. And I think that might be on the actual webpage as well, that these are only trials that are looking for disease modification, slowing down the disease. Otherwise, there'd be many more, observational trials or trials looking at different interventions that might target a specific aspect of ALS, breathing or communication, depression, those kind of things aren't on the Signal.
So I have another question here that came in ahead of the panel. If I can't tolerate riluzole, does that knock me out of most trials? Yeah, I see Judy shaking her head.
It does not. It does not. It just usually you either have to be a stable dose of riluzole for 30 days or no riluzole for 30 days. It's the same with all of the approved medications. There's a certain number of days, either you have to be stable dose. I feel like often it's 30 days, sometimes it's 60, sometimes it's 90, but most often it's 30. But you absolutely don't need to be on something if it's not something that you can tolerate. You just have to be off of it for 30 days.
Monique or Tim, were you, did you take Riluzole concomitantly with your trial? Monique, and no. Tim, yes. So I think it varies. So I think that it's not. I wouldn't say that it knocks you out of most trials. I think that we're pretty clear on that, and that as long as it's a stable dose or a zero dose, and that you haven't made any changes prior to entering the trial, you should be fine in most of them.
And then they want you to commit, like they don't want you to stop Riluzole halfway through the trial either. So, you know, because that would affect the results. So you're either committing to Riluzole or you're not committing.
Good. So another question, where can I find information on research being done on stem cells and gene therapy?
Signal. The gene therapy Signal, for sure. Stem cells, you can, I mean, you could use any of the resources we're providing at the end of the webinar to search for trials specifically for stem cells. We don't have that feature specifically on Signal, but you could definitely, I mean, all the trials are listed, so you could scroll down and see which ones. Generally the word cell appears. So if you wanted to just target stem cells, you could do that. If it's more that you want than just what's available via trial, like you want more information, then, you know, Tim had mentioned at the beginning that there is a website that's ALS Clinical Trials and Research, that's on Facebook. Often people put you know, maybe some basic science trials in there, some things that are done in animal models. You know, if you want really basic understanding about how these types of therapies, both stem cells and gene therapies, work. So that's a really good, like, I get a lot of information from there. I also subscribe to a lot of different science publications. You can get, if that's the kind of information, if you really want the nitty gritty, you can do that. Go on to PubMed and do literature searches. It just depends where you know, if you just want to know about clinical trials or you want to know about the whole deal.
Monique or Tim, was that something that you included in your search, or were specific looking for in your search for trials? Was gene therapy or stem cells, or were they not available at the time?
Back when I was eligible for my jobs, back in 2013, it just wasn't available.
Well, that was sort of early days in a lot of the clinical research when you were, you know, looking into trials.
Well, Tim's typing, I would just say that it's been not only 2013, my husband was diagnosed in 2019, and there was only a handful of trials to choose from then. So I can't even imagine in 2013. And now it's just changed. So it's just in the last couple of years, it's changed so much. Like, it's actually amazing. I never would have predicted that when my husband was diagnosed that we'd see the change that we did. It's like very positive and makes us very optimistic.
Well, and it's thanks to the work that you all do. Before we'll give Tim a minute before we go on to our next question.
After watching Steve Gleason get stem cells, I was a hard no.
Okay. I'm sure there's more to that, but we can follow up with the rest of the story if you'd like.
I think that goes down to just the people that are watching the webinar. You know, that comes down to what your preference is too, because there's a lot of difference between going to a clinical trial that, like, what we wanted was something that would have the least impact on our lives. And so we were really interested, for us, just having something that was oral that we could just take home with us. And so I think stem cell was something, you know, there was a specific trial. Brainstorm was around when my husband was diagnosed, and, you know, there was just a different kind of commitment there, right? You're going to get a lumbar puncture, you're going to have the procedure done, you know, so it's just again, a difference in what you're willing to accept for an intervention.
I always say too, with stem cells, the doctors here will say they're still in their infancy stages here in the United States. So we still have a lot to learn. I mean, it sounds like they're super exciting and interesting. Just like gene therapy is interesting and exciting, and everything is promising until the data is shared. But I think in the United States, the stem cell trials are still in the infancy stages.
I think that's right. Hopefully something good comes out of them. Here's an interesting question. This is kind of a preclinical question, but I'd be interested to know your thoughts on this if you have them. This came from the chat. So what is the emphasis placed on lower motor neurons, and upper motor neurons are rarely or if never involved?
It's asking why, or?
Yeah, why the emphasis on lower motor neurons? I guess as a target for clinical or therapeutic intervention.
Yeah, and I think that just has to do with the research that's been conducted. I think, looking at upper motor neurons, from what I understand, is a newer way of doing research and a newer way of thinking of the ALS pathophysiology. So I think, looking at the mechanisms of treatments that's just how that's the research that's been done up until now, and that upper motor neuron research is just a little bit I guess more recent to the whole research world. So I think some of us might know of a researcher that very much is interested in upper motor neuron, and they're looking at putting out a trial in the future that I think is more closer targeting upper motor neurons. But that's just because most of the research in the past and the pathophysiology that has been thought to cause ALS has just been focused more on lower motor neurons. Say that 10 times.
I think we all have. So yeah, I know that there is some early stage drugs out. There is one actually, the NU9, that is specifically targeting upper motor neurons, or at least emphasizing them more so than some others do. So that's Dr. Osdindler's work out of Northwestern. Here's a one. This is one that we all struggle with, I think, is many of the trials exclude based on weakness or diagnosis that happened more than 24, 36 months. How do you see that changing? Is that something that is likely to improve, or we can get more patients eligible for trials based on when they were diagnosed or when they had the onset of weakness?
Mm-hmm. I was pretty sure this question would come up, or that we talk about this. So there are actually very few, but there are some trials, just keep looking for them, that aren't looking at your date of diagnosis or your date of onset of weakness. So there are those trials out there. They're just not as frequent as other trials. Like when researchers are setting up trials, they have to like, you can't have people that are so different, because we know ALS, like everyone has heard that ALS is a heterogeneous disease, right? So everyone kind of has their own characteristics about their ALS. And so if you group all those people together and just give them a treatment, you're not going to see any differences unless you pre-specify these groups ahead of time, which happens. But there's what was the question? Can we go back to the question?
It's like the time from diagnosis.
Oh, time from diagnosis. Yeah, thank you. I just went into the whole, yeah. So there are those trials happening, and then there is a trial, I guess, in Europe that is actually using more of a formula to decide, that's going to classify you, rather than using your onset of weakness or date of diagnosis. So that is happening, because everyone knows that maybe isn't the best way of setting up a clinical trial, is just based on when you had symptoms. Like, that might not be the best way of setting up the trial. So there are some trials that aren't using that. And then there's, like I said, there's some trials in Europe that are using a formula instead.
Yeah, the MCALS
Sorry
is,
about that, lots of
MCALS, I think is what you're referring to. The MCALS calculation that that predicts progression. Yes. Rate of progression. Tim, did you have something to add?
I think trying to get into an E, a P is something to try at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're hoping that more and more clinical trials include an EAP or expanded access protocol, where kind of the idea flips from, like where a clinical trial is a research endeavor, EAP is really more focused on treatment, but you can also collect data as well. But the inclusion criteria, I mean, these are only for patients that are not eligible for the trial. So like Tim said, that's something to look for if you are beyond the threshold of most of the trials.
And observational trials generally don't have that sort of time of diagnosis. So if you just want to be in any trial and add to science, then observational trials, you can generally join an observational trial.
Monique, I know that you're probably on the other side of most of those inclusion criteria. How does that strike you?
I'm just kind of hanging out, waiting for the results from everyone else. But I do participate in random observational trials when I have the opportunity.
That's fantastic, and thank you for that, and thank you for anybody that's considering being in a clinical trial, so that Monique can hang out and wait for the results of the trials that you participate in. So thank you. So if you are at one ALS clinic and want to roll in a trial at another hospital, how does that work? Are doctors okay with someone doing this? Like maybe they're running the trial at that clinic, but you would prefer to actually go to the hospital.
We welcome that. I guess it's research center by research center. But if we are trying to enroll in a trial and somebody from another clinic meets the criteria, and wants to do the journey to come to our center to do the trial, we are happy to have somebody. So that's another good question for whatever center that you see a trial at that's of interest to you, is to I know we keep saying the word platform trial, and I'm not trying to like plug the platform trial, but some centers, there's a lot of centers in that conduct that trial, that one same trial. And I think center by center, they have the right to decide how they want to enroll participants in that trial. So we allow people from outside our center to participate. We welcome them. Some other centers may first focus on theirs and then welcome others.
Yeah.
And others might not have the bandwidth. They might make them become a clinic patient in order to participate. So again, not one single answer, but definitely should be able to be answered by the center where you want to do the trial.
Do you find that happening? I mean, you're Mass General, of course, but do you find that patients are coming from other areas to seek treatment where they have opportunities in other?
Oh yeah, they'll come do trials with us. Remember, think too, if we have a phase 1 that only enrolls maybe there's 12 spots and 8 centers doing the same trial. So you only get a few people in, but I believe, and we advocate for whoever meets the criteria to get into the trial, but sometimes it's really tough to get in because there's only a few spots and you have a lot of your own patients who are interested, and then people from outside, it's a little bit more challenging. But I don't know, I feel like I think there's a lot more trials. I think we've mentioned this before. I hope that people are finding opportunities to get involved in research. I mean, from where I sit, I feel like I receive less questions from faraway people who can't find trials, which makes me really happy. I used to get a lot of questions from everywhere. Judy, I don't know where to begin. And they're from Texas or Arizona, and so now I feel like that has really changed, and that just makes me so happy that I hope I'm right in what I'm feeling. I don't know. You all know me maybe better than I do, but that's what I'm seeing, is there are opportunities out there. So.
Anyone else thoughts on that? Yeah, I think that, yeah, having more opportunities. I mean, one of the, we've seen it in oncology, we've seen it in other disease areas where there's this a great collaboration amongst the clinics out there, and it just expands the opportunities for people. And I know that on the clinical trial team, we're interested in trying to do more there, and getting a cooperative, if you will, of clinic sites where there's more available places for folks to go.
It's a lot of work.
I just-
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. I'm the person that asked that question. I find it hard to navigate when we love our provider, but I don't think he is really diving into the clinical trials for my husband who has ALS. And we really put our trust in him, and we're at Columbia but I feel like there are some trials at like Hospital of Special Surgery or Mount Sinai, and I just almost feel like, am I going against his suggestion? We're so new to this, trying to navigate and trying to do what's best for him. I just find the whole thing I know this is not the platform for this, but hopefully other people find it as well. I just trying to, do this, steer this ship, and it's very rocky. And just any advice pertaining to that, like, do you put all your trust in your one doctor, or are you just going to go with your gut and put all the applications into the different trials?
Do that. I said that earlier on. Like, you contact whoever because there's always going to be circumstances that your significant other might not meet inclusion criteria anyway at the trials at your site. So you know what, make as many calls as you can, contact as many sites as you can. As far as you're able to travel, contact as far out as you can. And because sometimes this also takes a while for some people to contact you back. So I would say, leave as many calls, email as many times as you can. If you don't hear back from a trial site, email them again. You know what, if your primary neurologist at your ALS clinic has any offense to you doing that, then you rethink who that carer is, because they shouldn't be concerned. You do whatever you need to do to get into a clinical trial that you and your husband feel comfortable getting into.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it does fall a lot on you. Don't think clinical trials are going to come and find you.
Right. Yeah, that's what when we were
if
beginning.
you're not at one of those sites, like if you're at Mass General or something, they will find you. But if you're at centers that don't have a lot of trials going on, or you've got to go find them.
Right.
Yeah, but they have small staffs.
Thank you so much.
They have small research staffs, even though Columbia is a wonderful hospital and provides great care. They do have there may be a smaller research center. So do what's best for you and your husband. I started to say before you started talking, is research is not for wimps. There's a big commitment on your part and that of your husband. So, you're making a huge commitment and contribution. So go for it if it's right for you guys.
Yeah. And Patricia, I've had to email
sometimes.
Sometimes I've emailed, just hit resend, a couple times, because a site might, like Judy said, a site might be smaller and they might just be overwhelmed at some point, and they'll eventually get back to you. But don't be afraid. Because that did happen to me, where I'm like, oh, I'm going to be the person that's bothering them. They're not going to call me back.
Right.
Sometimes
Exactly. It's
afraid.
against my nature to be that pest, but I'm going to have to become one.
I think that's a hallmark of many of the advocates in the ALS community is tenacity and persistence. And so, welcome to the community. And so you are fully anointed to be as pesky as you need to be. So.
Okay. Thanks again.
Kindly pesky.
Yes, I know that about you, Kelly, of course. So We have just a couple of minutes left. Is there anybody want to like hop off mute? Any burning questions that you might have that you want to just throw at the team, and we'll see if we can handle it. Well, while you're thinking about that or mustering up the courage to do that, I just want to say thank you to, first of all, I Am ALS for putting this on. This is I think, I really feel like it was informative. I hope you all do too. I also want to thank everybody that was participating and listening in on this. I hope it was informative. I hope that you got something out of it. I hope that it has helped you to be more confident in your decision making on a clinical trial. I know that we're not, intended to provide any recommendations or advice, but I really do hope that the more patients that you are more willing to participate in clinical trials, because I think that that's how the community benefits. And so I want to thank all of you. And I hope, like I said, I hope that you're going to participate in trials. And then also I want to make sure that I thank the panelists. This is a fantastic group of individuals. I think they had the right experience and the right mindset to be able to answer these kinds of questions, A, and B, they're just great people. So it was just a true pleasure moderating this.
Thank you, Rob. You also did a terrific job.
Well, thank you. I do have a final question here that came in from the chat. So is there a way for patients living abroad, like in Asia, to get access to clinical trial medications? I guess that would be absent your willingness to travel overseas for regular clinic visits.
Yeah, you have to, if you are absolutely able to participate in trials at centers in other countries. If you can make the travel, if you've got to think about so many more things when you live in another country. You have to possibly move to that country, leave your family behind, pay for housing, pay for food, pay for if something happens outside the research trial, you have to go to the hospital. You don't have insurance. So there's so much more to think about. I'm not sure if that's the question, or if they're asking if they can just have access to the clinical trial medication without participating in the trial. And I guess if they could participate in an expanded access way, that would be the only way I could think of outside the clinical trial itself.
And another shameless plug for Signal, we do list trials in all countries that we do our best to try to capture all of the trials outside of anywhere that are occurring anywhere in the world. So we that is a place to look, and we do list the countries, and you can search by country as well. But yeah, I do know, I know people that have traveled to other countries to participate in trials outside of the US.
And if
So is there like a places for that, like in other countries? Is that in the website?
Yeah, the ALS Signal, which you can find on at the I AM ALS site.
And then I guess this is, I will give you this feedback based on what people with ALS wanted when we created the Signal. People wanted to know what items in clinical trials were supplements. They also wanted to know what medications might be approved for other indications and in what countries. So you can search the Signal that way as well if you want to know what drugs have been approved either by the FDA or by other countries, and if you want to self-experiment with perhaps a supplement that they might be studying in another country that you otherwise wouldn't be able to participate in their clinical trial.
So Blake, do you have anything else, or is that?
We are good to wrap up unless there's any final questions. I did want to share with everyone that next week there will be another clinical trial focused event. This one, Tim, I remember to share about this. This one will be a little bit different in that we have a team of advocates who will be sharing about an event that was hosted last year, our Action Summit, which was focused on bringing together stakeholders to have a conversation on the clinical trial experience and how we can improve clinical trial and retention. So this webinar next week will be a report out from that and the priorities that came from those conversations, and then another conversation as kind of the second half of that on actionable solutions and the ways that people can get involved. So if you're interested in getting involved in improving clinical trial retention and recruitment, we'd love to have you there. We'll share a link after the event so you can sign up to join and listen or engage in the conversation as well. So thank you everyone for being here. We're so glad to have had you. We hope that you join us for another Ask Me Anything ALS event conversation. We have lots of different topics coming up, and we'll be sure to share more information once we get our event resource and the recording ready to go. So thank you so much again, and we hope to see you soon. And thank you to our panelists as well, actually. Huge thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Night, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Good night.